You know when a stranger rescues you from an awkward situation, and you realize a little too late, he didn't come just to rescue you. She asks for help in a restaurant hallway. He flashes that half smile and steps in with way too much confidence for it to be just kindness. In seconds, the date turns into chaos, the mood sparks, and she gets it. This man doesn't do anything halfway. Natalie Coleman had made a series of questionable life decisions, but agreeing to this blind date might top the list. She sat across from Derek, or was it Derek? Watching his mouth move in what she assumed were words, though her brain had stopped processing them approximately 20 minutes ago when he'd started his monologue about cryptocurrency mining. And that's why blockchain technology is literally going to replace the entire banking system by next year, he continued, gesturing enthusiastically with his fork. A piece of lettuce flew off and landed on the white tablecloth between them. He didn't notice. Natalie nodded mechanically, her smile feeling more like a grimace. Marina owed her. Big time. Her best friend had sworn this guy was perfect and totally your type. Unless her type had recently evolved to include men who used literally incorrectly and spoke in financial jargon for 45 consecutive minutes, Marina had been catastrophically wrong. "Excuse me," Natalie said, standing abruptly. "I need to use the restroom." Derek barely paused in his explanation of mining rigs to acknowledge her departure with a distracted wave. The restaurant's hallway offered blessed silence. Natalie leaned against the cool wall, closing her eyes and counting to 10, then 20. Then she seriously considered climbing out the bathroom window, consequences be damned. She was debating the structural integrity of the building's fire escape when the women's restroom door swung open and she collided directly into what felt like a wall of solid muscle. "Sorry, she started, looking up. The words died in her throat. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. The man steadying her with his hands on her shoulders was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair styled in that perfectly imperfect way that probably took either no effort or tremendous effort, she could never tell which. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes. God, his eyes were the kind of deep brown that made you forget your own name. She knew those eyes. "We've met," they said simultaneously, then both laughed awkwardly. 6 months ago. That corporate building inauguration where she'd stood by the champagne fountain, feeling out of place in a room full of tech executives and venture capitalists. She'd been there because her firm had designed the building's interior spaces. He'd been there because, well, she'd later learned he owned half the companies in attendance. Brandon Whitaker, CEO of Whitaker Technologies, a multinational that did something complicated with software and artificial intelligence. They'd been introduced briefly by someone whose name she couldn't remember, but she remembered him. Specifically, she remembered the way he'd looked at her across the room for the entire evening, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. They'd circled each other all night, but never actually talked beyond that initial handshake. "Natalie Coleman," he said now, and the fact that he remembered her name made something flutter in her chest. The architect who hates small talk and spent that entire party hiding by the dessert table. "I wasn't hiding," she protested, then reconsidered. "Okay, I was absolutely hiding. And you're Brandon Whitaker, the CEO who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else than at industry events." His lips curved into a half-smile that transformed his entire face from intimidatingly handsome to devastatingly attractive. Guilty as charged. They stood there in the hallway, her hand somehow still on his arm from their collision, neither moving away. The moment stretched, charged with the same electricity from that night 6 months ago. Then Derek's voice echoed from the dining room. "Did you know that Ethereum gas fees are actually calculated based on computational complexity?" The spell broke. Natalie's eyes widened in horror, remembering her current predicament. Brandon's eyebrows rose, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Blind date? Is it that obvious?" "The look of desperate resignation on your face was my first clue." He tilted his head, studying her. "That bad?" "He's been explaining blockchain technology for the better part of an hour," Natalie said flatly. "I'm an architect. I design buildings. My knowledge of cryptocurrency begins and ends with knowing it exists." Brandon laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. The sound did something dangerous to her pulse. "I have a proposition," Natalie said suddenly, the words tumbling out before her brain could filter them. She grabbed his forearm with both hands now, desperate. "Please, could you just come to my table? Pretend there's an emergency. Anything. I'll owe you. I'll design your next office building for free. I'll name my firstborn child after you. I'll—" "Have dinner with me," he interrupted, his voice low and smooth. "A real dinner. Next week." Natalie blinked. "What?" "That's my price for rescuing you." His eyes held hers, intense and slightly mischievous. "One dinner. Your choice of restaurant." She should say no. She didn't know this man beyond one evening of stolen glances and a 2-minute conversation in a hallway. But his eyes were warm, and his smile was genuine, and frankly, anything was better than another minute of cryptocurrency discourse. "Deal," she said. Brandon's smile widened into something that could only be described as wicked. "Good. Now let's get you out of here. Just make it believable," Natalie whispered as they walked toward the dining area. "Like a work emergency or something. Keep it simple." "Simple," Brandon agreed, but the glint in his eye should have warned her. They approached the table where Derek was now on his phone, presumably calculating his Bitcoin portfolio. He looked up as they arrived, confusion crossing his face. What happened next would replay in Natalie's mind for years to come. Brandon walked straight up to her, placed his hand possessively on her waist, his palm warm even through her blouse, and turned to face her date with an expression of carefully controlled disappointment that was absolutely, devastatingly perfect. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying just the right note of hurt and barely contained anger. "This is who you're having dinner with?" Natalie's jaw dropped. This was not the plan. This was so far from the plan that the plan was now in a different zip code. Derek stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. What? "I'm her boyfriend," Brandon continued, his hand still on Natalie's waist, thumb moving in an absent circle that was making it very difficult for her to form coherent thoughts. "And I have to say, I'm incredibly disappointed to find my girlfriend having an intimate dinner with another man." "Boyfriend?" Derek's face had gone pale. "She didn't mention a boyfriend, didn't she?" Brandon's tone suggested deep betrayal. He looked at Natalie with such perfectly executed hurt that for a second, even she almost believed him. "Natalie, how could you?" She should be furious. This was not a simple work emergency. This was theatrical, ridiculous, completely over the top. But looking at Brandon's face, the way his eyes sparkled with suppressed laughter, even as his expression remained wounded, she felt an inappropriate urge to burst into hysterics. "I can explain," she managed weakly, mostly because it seemed like something she should say. "I think you've explained enough," Brandon said sadly. He turned to Derek, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "I apologize for the scene. Clearly I've interrupted your evening." "No, yes, Derek grabbed his jacket with shaking hands. "I should go, I definitely should go. I'm sorry, I didn't know." He practically ran from the restaurant. The moment he was gone, Natalie whirled on Brandon, fully intending to give him a piece of her mind. But the second she saw him, jaw clenched, shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter, her anger dissolved into something dangerously close to hysterical giggles. "You said simple," she hissed, fighting her own smile. "That was simple," Brandon said innocently, then completely gave up the pretense and laughed, a full, gorgeous sound that made half the restaurant turn to look. "You should have seen your face. I should hate you right now. But you don't." It wasn't a question, and damn it, she didn't. She should. This man had just caused a scene in a nice restaurant, traumatized her blind date, and turned her simple rescue plan into a full theatrical production. But looking at him now, laughing freely with his hand still warm on her waist, she felt something else entirely. "Come on," Brandon said, finally releasing her waist, but immediately capturing her hand instead. "Let's get out of here before the staff asks us to leave." They made it outside before the laughter overtook them both. Natalie leaned against the brick wall of the restaurant, clutching her stomach, tears streaming down her face from laughing so hard. Brandon stood in front of her, one hand braced against the wall beside her head, his own laughter deep and contagious. "You're insane," she gasped between giggles. "That was completely insane. You asked for believable," he pointed out, grinning. "I asked for a work emergency." This was more fun. She couldn't argue with that. As their laughter finally subsided, Natalie became acutely aware of their position. Him leaning close, her back against the wall, the October evening cool around them, but the space between them decidedly warm. His eyes dropped to her lips for just a second before returning to her eyes. "So," Brandon said softly, his voice doing things to her insides that should probably be illegal. "About that dinner." "Right." Natalie's voice came out breathier than intended. "You definitely earned it." "Next Friday, 7 o'clock? It's a date." The words slipped out before she could consider them. "I mean, not a date, just a dinner. To thank you for the rescue, even though your rescue was completely theatrical and unnecessary and—" "Natalie." His smile was warm, genuine. "It's okay. Friday at 7. I'll pick you up." He insisted on walking her to her car, his presence solid and warm beside her. When they reached her sedan, he opened the driver's door with old-fashioned courtesy that made her heart do a little flip. "Thank you," she said, suddenly shy. "For tonight. Even if you did completely disregard the plan. Anytime you need a fake boyfriend, I'm your guy." He said it jokingly, but something in his eyes was serious. "See you Friday, Natalie Coleman." She drove home in a daze, her phone buzzing with increasingly frantic texts from Marina demanding details. But Natalie ignored them all, too busy replaying the evening in her mind, the way Brandon had laughed, the warmth of his hand, the weight of his gaze. This was dangerous, she thought. This thing that had started 6 months ago with a single look across a crowded room and had just reignited with catastrophic force. But as she parked in her apartment complex and finally checked her phone, finding a text from an unknown number that simply said, "Can't wait for Friday, B," she couldn't bring herself to care about the danger. Some things were worth the risk. Brandon had been in high-stakes negotiations with Fortune 500 CEOs, presented technology proposals to skeptical boards, and once gave a keynote speech to 3,000 people without breaking a sweat. None of that compared to the nervousness currently churning in his stomach as he stood outside Natalie Coleman's apartment building at precisely 6:58 p.m. He'd thought about her constantly since Friday, the way she'd looked at him in that hallway, desperate and beautiful, the sound of her laugh when his ridiculous plan had actually worked, the feel of her waist under his palm, soft and warm and dangerously distracting. He'd also thought about the fact that he'd agreed to this dinner as payment for his services, which meant technically this wasn't a real date. That thought bothered him more than it should. The lobby door opened and Brandon forgot how to breathe. Natalie wore a deep green dress that hugged her curves and fell just above her knees. Her dark hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She'd done something to her eyes that made them look even bigger, and her lips were painted a soft rose color that made him think very inappropriate thoughts for someone who was supposedly just having dinner. "Hi," she said, slightly breathless. "Sorry, I was running late and couldn't find my other earring, and then I realized I'd been wearing it the whole time, which is concerning for my mental state, but—" She stopped abruptly, seeming to realize she was rambling. "Sorry, I'm nervous." The confession disarmed him completely. "You're nervous? I've been standing out here for 10 minutes trying to remember how normal human conversation works." Her smile was radiant. "Really? Really?" He offered his arm, which she took with a small smile. "You look beautiful, by the way, like devastatingly beautiful. I should have led with that instead of admitting I forgot how to talk." Natalie laughed, and the sound settled something in his chest. "You're not bad yourself. Very successful CEO who moonlights as a fake boyfriend. I'm considering adding it to my LinkedIn profile," Brandon said, opening the car door for her. "Special skills, hostile takeovers, strategic planning, theatrical restaurant rescues." The restaurant he'd chosen was an intimate Italian place in Brooklyn, known for its exceptional food and terrible lighting, which meant people came there to eat, not to be seen. Natalie's eyes lit up when she saw it. "This place has been on my list forever," she said as they were seated at a corner table. "How did you know?" Brandon had spent 3 hours researching restaurants, reading through her Instagram for clues about her taste, and finally calling his assistant at midnight to demand recommendations, but he just shrugged. "Lucky guess." They ordered. She got the mushroom risotto, he got the osso buco, and then came the moment he'd been both anticipating and dreading: actual conversation. The blind date rescue had been easy, natural. But now, sitting across from her in candlelight, Brandon felt the weight of wanting to impress her. "So," Natalie said, saving him from his own awkwardness, "CEO of a tech company. That sounds impressive, and also like you probably work 100 hours a week." "Only 90, Brandon deadpanned. "I'm very balanced." She laughed. "What made you want to start a technology company? Wait, did you start it or inherit it? Sorry, I'm making assumptions about your origin story." "No, you're right. I started it with my college roommate 8 years ago. We had this idea about AI-powered logistics solutions that everyone said was impossible." He paused, realizing he was about to launch into a work spiel. "Sorry, this is probably boring." "It's not boring," Natalie interrupted, leaning forward. "What made everyone say it was impossible?" And just like that, they were talking, really talking. Brandon explained his company's evolution, and instead of her eyes glazing over like most people's did, she asked intelligent questions, made connections he hadn't considered. She told him about her architecture firm, about the pressure of being one of the youngest senior architects there, about her dream of designing sustainable housing projects. "So you want to change the world through buildings," Brandon summarized, "and I want to change it through software. We're both idealistic idiots." "The best kind of idiots," Natalie agreed, raising her wineglass. "To idealistic stupidity." "To idealistic stupidity," he echoed, clinking his glass against hers. The conversation flowed like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. They discovered they both loved horror movies, though she actually enjoyed being scared, and he mostly just tolerated it. They both had strong opinions about modern architecture, often the same opinions. They both preferred dogs over cats, though neither currently had pets due to their schedules. They both thought pineapple on pizza was an abomination, which Brandon declared was the real foundation of any lasting relationship. Relationship? Natalie raised an eyebrow, but she was smiling. Brandon felt his ears heat. "I meant friendship, lasting friendship, obviously. Since we're becoming friends, right?" "Right," she said, but something flickered in her eyes that made his pulse skip. "Friends who fake date to rescue each other from bad situations. Exactly, it's a very specific type of friendship." Very specific. They were both grinning like idiots now. The server brought their entrees, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Embarrassing childhood stories, worst first dates, though Brandon privately thought nothing could top her cryptocurrency nightmare, favorite travel destinations. Brandon learned that Natalie had a weakness for terrible reality TV, collected vintage architecture books, and made the world's best chocolate chip cookies according to her best friend Marina. "Marina," Brandon said carefully. "Is she the one who set up the blind date?" Natalie groaned. "Yes, she means well, but her taste in men is questionable at best. She keeps saying I'm too picky." "Are you too picky?" "I prefer to think of it as having standards." She met his eyes. "I don't want to waste time on people I don't connect with." The weight of that statement hung between them. "For what it's worth," Brandon said quietly, "I don't think you're too picky. I think you know what you want." "And what do I want?" The question was light, teasing, but there was genuine curiosity underneath. Brandon considered her across the candlelight. Someone who challenges you, someone who makes you laugh, someone who sees you, really sees you. Not just the successful architect, but the woman who hides at parties and binge-watches horror movies and rambles when she's nervous. Natalie's breath caught audibly. "That's very specific," you asked. "I did." She cleared her throat, looking flustered in a way that made her even more beautiful. "What about you? What do you want?" The honest answer, "You, I want you," would be too much, too soon. So Brandon said instead, "I want someone real. Every woman I've dated in the past 5 years has wanted the CEO, the money, the status. I want someone who'd still like me if I lost everything tomorrow." "Would you still like yourself if you lost everything tomorrow?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "I'm serious," Natalie said gently. "You've built this empire, this identity around being successful. If it all disappeared, who would you be?" No one had ever asked him that. No one had ever cared to dig that deep. "I don't know," Brandon admitted. "Probably someone who still makes terrible jokes and rescues women from bad blind dates." "Then you'd still be pretty great," Natalie said simply. Something shifted in that moment. The careful dance they'd been doing, pretending this was just a thank you dinner, just two people having a meal, dissolved. This was something else. Something dangerous and thrilling and absolutely terrifying. The server brought dessert, a shared tiramisu that Natalie insisted they split. They ate slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. Brandon told her about his sister Paula, who called him daily to mock his workaholic tendencies. Natalie told him about her parents in Boston, both professors who still didn't quite understand why she'd chosen architecture over academia. When the check came, they'd been talking for over 3 hours. The restaurant was mostly empty, the servers politely pretending not to notice they were lingering. "I should let you take me home," Natalie said reluctantly. "You should," Brandon agreed, not moving. They stayed for another 15 minutes. Finally, inevitably, they left. The drive back to her apartment was filled with comfortable silence, interspersed with observations about the city at night, the way Brooklyn looked when it was late and quiet. Brandon walked her to her door because he couldn't imagine doing anything else. "Thank you for dinner," Natalie said, turning to face him in the hallway outside her apartment. "It was really wonderful." "It was," Brandon agreed. He should leave. He should definitely leave. Instead, he stepped closer, watching her eyes widen slightly. "Natalie, can I be honest with you? Please. This didn't feel like a thank you dinner to me. It felt like the best date I've ever been on." She bit her lip, and he watched the movement like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. "It felt like that to me too. So maybe we could do it again. Not as payment, not as obligation, just because we want to. I'd like that." Her smile was soft, genuine. "I'd really like that." Brandon reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Then, because he was apparently incapable of making good decisions around this woman, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. The moment his lips touched her skin, he felt her sharp intake of breath. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, and the skin beneath his lips was impossibly soft. He let the kiss linger for just a second longer than strictly appropriate before pulling back. Natalie's eyes were closed. When she opened them, they were dark and unfocused. "Good night, Natalie Coleman," Brandon said softly. "Good night, Brandon Whitaker." He forced himself to walk away, to not look back, though every instinct screamed at him to turn around. He made it to his car, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a full minute, his forehead resting on the steering wheel. He was in so much trouble. His phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for tonight. For the record, that was the best fake payment dinner I've ever had. N." Brandon smiled despite himself and typed back, "Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Just as friends who have really good fake payment dinners together?" Her response came immediately. "I think friends who rescue each other definitely need regular coffee meetings. Tomorrow works." He drove home with a ridiculous smile on his face, already counting the hours until he'd see her again. This was dangerous, he thought, falling this fast, this hard. But some things were worth the risk. Natalie stared at her phone screen, reading the same text message for the 5th time. It was from Brandon, sent at 6:47 a.m. "Good morning. Found this article about sustainable architecture and thought of you." Attached was a link to a fascinating piece about green building materials in urban development. He'd thought of her. At 6:47 in the morning, before most humans had achieved consciousness. She was smiling like an idiot at her phone when Marina walked into her office without knocking, a habit Natalie had long since given up trying to break. "Why do you look like someone just told you puppies exist?" Marina asked, dropping into the chair across from Natalie's desk. She was wearing her typical athletic wear, having clearly come straight from the gym where she trained clients. "I don't look like anything," Natalie said, putting her phone face down too quickly. Marina's eyes narrowed with predatory interest. "Oh, this is good. Who is he?" "There's no he. Natalie Coleman, I've known you for 10 years. You have exactly 3 expressions: focused architect, politely interested, and someone just texted me and made my entire morning. That's the 3rd one. So I repeat, who is he?" Natalie sighed, knowing resistance was futile. "Remember that disastrous blind date you set me up on last week?" Marina winced. "Derek? Yeah, he texted me asking if you were okay. Something about a boyfriend showing up. I thought you made that up to escape." "I did, kind of." Natalie explained the whole story. The collision in the hallway, Brandon's theatrical rescue, the dinner that had turned into 3 hours of perfect conversation. She left out the part about the forehead kiss that she'd been replaying in her mind for 48 hours straight. Marina listened with increasing delight, her grin growing more manic with each detail. Wait, she interrupted. Brandon Whitaker, the tech CEO? The one from that building opening where you spent the whole night pretending not to stare at each other? We weren't staring. Natalie, you literally walked into a waiter because you were too busy staring. The waiter had to catch his own tray. That was unfortunately accurate. So what's happening now? Marina demanded. Are you dating? Please tell me you're dating. I need this after the Derek disaster, which, for the record, I'm still apologizing for. We're not dating, we're just friends. We got coffee yesterday, it was nice. Just friends, Marina repeated flatly. Friends who fake date to rescue each other and then have romantic dinners and send each other articles at dawn. It was one article. About architecture, it's a professional interest. Honey, when a man sends you articles before 7 a.m., it means he woke up thinking about you. That's not professional. That's basically a declaration of love in guy language. Natalie felt her cheeks heat. You're being dramatic. Am I? Let's test this. Text him back right now. Marina, do it. Say something casual. I want to see how fast he responds. Rolling her eyes but secretly curious, Natalie picked up her phone and typed, Thanks for the article. Really interesting perspective on material sustainability. How's your morning going? She hit send and placed the phone on her desk. It buzzed immediately. Marina shrieked. Immediately! He responded immediately! Natalie grabbed the phone, her heart doing something complicated. Brandon had written, Morning's better now. Meeting in 10 minutes, but I'm already thinking about lunch. Want to grab something? I promise not to lecture you about blockchain technology. She laughed out loud. Oh, you're gone, Marina said with satisfaction. Completely gone. Look at that smile. That's not a friend smile. That's an I'm falling for this man smile. I am not... Natalie. Babe. I love you. But you're delusional. Marina stood up, stretching. Text him back. Say yes to lunch. And for the love of all that is holy, stop calling this friendship. Friends don't make each other smile like that. After Marina left, Natalie stared at her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, Lunch sounds perfect, as long as you also promise not to stage any more theatrical restaurant scenes. His response, no promises. I'm very committed to my fake boyfriend role. Pick you up at noon. She was definitely smiling again. Sans de Cuna, Brandon sat in his corner office, supposedly reviewing quarterly reports. Instead, he was texting Natalie like a teenager who'd just discovered smartphones. You're doing it again, said a voice from his doorway. Brandon looked up to find his best friend Rodrigo leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing an expression of deep amusement. Doing what? Smiling at your phone like it just cured cancer. Rodrigo walked in and collapsed onto the leather sofa. Who is she? There's no she. Rodrigo laughed. Man, I've known you for 15 years. You never smile at your phone. You barely smile at actual human beings. But you've been grinning like an idiot for the past week. So I repeat, who is she? Brandon considered lying. Then he remembered this was Rodrigo, who could detect bullshit from 3 states away. Her name is Natalie. She's an architect. We've been spending time together. Spending time together, Rodrigo repeated slowly. Is that what the kids call dating now? We're not dating, we're friends. The laughter that erupted from Rodrigo was genuinely insulting. Oh, that's beautiful. That's perfect. You, Brandon Whitaker, who hasn't had a friend who was a woman since college, are suddenly just friends with someone who makes you check your phone every 30 seconds. I don't check my phone every 30 seconds. You've checked it 4 times since I walked in here. That was 90 seconds ago. Brandon put his phone face down on his desk, which only made Rodrigo laugh harder. This is amazing, Rodrigo said, wiping his eyes. Tell me everything. How'd you meet? Brandon explained the blind date rescue, watching Rodrigo's grin grow increasingly manic. Let me get this straight, Rodrigo said when he finished. You pretended to be her boyfriend to rescue her from a bad date, then leveraged that into getting an actual date, which you're now calling not a date, because we're building a friendship first, Brandon said, hearing how defensive he sounded. "We have coffee, we text, we're getting to know each other. You're in love with her." "I am not." "Brandon, buddy, I've seen you in relationships. This isn't you being casual, this is you being terrified." Rodrigo's expression softened slightly. "Which means she matters." Brandon couldn't deny that. His phone buzzed. Both men looked at it. "Is that her?" Rodrigo asked. "Maybe. Check it. I want to see the smile." Brandon grabbed his phone. Natalie had sent a photo of her office window view with the caption, "Your competition. My other lunch date has this view." He smiled, he couldn't help it, and sent back, "Tough competition, but I have better conversation skills than a window." Her response, "Debatable. The window doesn't make terrible jokes." His fingers flew over the keyboard. "But does the window bring you coffee?" "The window doesn't forget my coffee order and bring me decaf by accident." Brandon winced. That had happened yesterday. "I said I was sorry. That barista clearly had it out for me." "Sure, blame the barista. See you at noon, Brandon Whitaker." "See you at noon, Natalie Coleman." He looked up to find Rodrigo watching him with something between amusement and exasperation. "Just friends," Rodrigo said. "Right. Keep telling yourself that, man. Maybe eventually you'll believe it." After Rodrigo left, Brandon sat alone in his office, staring at his phone. The texts with Natalie now filled several pages. They'd been talking constantly for a week, about everything and nothing. Random thoughts throughout the day, funny observations, articles that made them think of each other. This was friendship, he told himself, really good friendship. But when his phone buzzed again with a simple, "Can't wait for lunch" from Natalie, and his heart did that complicated flip thing it had been doing all week, Brandon had to admit that Rodrigo might have a point. He was in trouble. Beautiful, terrifying, wonderful trouble. Natalie was deep in a heated debate with Vicente about cantilever designs when her office phone buzzed with the receptionist's voice. "Natalie, there's a very attractive man here with coffee for you. Says his name is Brandon." Vicente's head snapped up so fast Natalie worried about whiplash. His eyes went comically wide, and a grin that could only be described as gleeful spread across his face. "I'll be right there," Natalie said into the phone, studiously avoiding Vicente's stare. "Oh, no, you don't," Vicente said, jumping up and blocking her path. "Who is Brandon, and why is he bringing you coffee at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday?" "He's a friend." "A friend," Vicente repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Natalie, darling, I've known you for 5 years. Your friends don't deliver coffee. Your friends barely remember your birthday." "He was in the neighborhood." "The neighborhood." Vicente clutched his chest dramatically. "The neighborhood of our office in Midtown, which is nowhere near anywhere someone just happens to be, unless they work here or are making a deliberate trip to see someone." Natalie tried to push past him. Vicente was surprisingly immovable for someone who looked like a strong wind could knock him over. "Vicente, I need to—" "Is he the CEO?" Vicente's eyes went even wider. "The one from the building opening? The one you swore you weren't staring at all night despite photographic evidence to the contrary?" "There was no photographic evidence. I have 17 photos on my phone that say otherwise. Don't think I didn't notice." He finally stepped aside but followed her closely. "I'm coming with you. I need to see this man who brings coffee to just friends." "You absolutely are not." But Vicente was already walking beside her, and short of physically restraining him, Natalie had no choice. They reached the reception area together. Brandon stood by the window, backlit by morning sun, holding 2 coffee cups and looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled, "Impossibly Attractive CEOs Who Make Poor Life Decisions." He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair slightly messed up in a way that suggested he'd run his hands through it recently. His face lit up when he saw her, that devastating smile transforming his features from merely handsome to absolutely unfair. "Good morning," he said, offering her one of the cups. "Vanilla latte, extra vanilla with cinnamon. And before you ask, yes, I triple-checked with the barista that it wasn't decaf." Natalie laughed, accepting the coffee. The cup was warm in her hands, and she noticed he'd drawn a little smiley face on the side with marker. Something in her chest squeezed dangerously. "You drew on my coffee cup." "The barista judged me," Brandon admitted, "but I committed to it." Vicente cleared his throat loudly. Natalie had briefly forgotten about him. which was concerning given he was standing less than 3 feet away making exaggerated interested faces. "Brandon, this is Vicente, my business partner." "Vicente, this is Brandon." "The friend," Vicente said, shaking Brandon's hand while giving Natalie meaningful looks. "The one who just happens to be in the neighborhood, with custom coffee orders memorized, as friends do." Brandon's lips twitched. "That's me. Professional, friendly coffee deliverer." "How wonderful," Vicente said with excessive brightness. "And you're in the neighborhood because meeting with a potential client for a building automation system." Brandon gestured vaguely toward downtown. "Thought I'd stop by since Natalie mentioned she had an early morning." "How thoughtful," Vicente said. "Natalie, didn't you say you had that thing, the important thing, that we need to discuss privately in your office right now?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, the thing, with the stuff." Vicente was already pulling her backward. "So sorry, Brandon, but we really must steal her away. Business emergencies. You understand?" Brandon was clearly trying not to laugh. "Of course, I should get going anyway." He caught Natalie's eye, his expression warm. "Enjoy the coffee." "Thank you," she managed. "Really, this was what friends do," he finished. But the way he looked at her suggested they both knew that wasn't quite true. The moment Brandon left, Vicente practically dragged Natalie back to her office and slammed the door. "That," he announced, "is not just a friend." "Vicente, no, absolutely not. I refuse to hear the friend argument." He paced dramatically, gesturing with his hands. "That man looked at you like you personally invented sunlight. He has your ridiculous custom coffee order memorized, and I know it's ridiculous because I've watched you order coffee and it's a paragraph long." He drew on the cup, Natalie. Drew on it. It was just a smiley face. A smiley face is a declaration of affection in guy language. Vicente stopped pacing and pointed at her. "And another thing, you smiled at him. Not your polite professional smile, not your thank you for the coffee smile. You smiled at him like he'd just rescued a kitten from a burning building while simultaneously solving world hunger." Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "I did not." "You absolutely did. I saw it. It was disgusting, also beautiful, but mostly disgusting because you're clearly both in denial." He collapsed into her desk chair, spinning it dramatically. "How long has this been going on?" "There's nothing going on. We've been hanging out for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of hanging out." Vicente made aggressive air quotes. "And he already knows your coffee order better than I do. And I've worked with you for 5 years. He's observant. He's obsessed. There's a difference." Vicente leaned forward. "Honey, I say this with love. You're both being idiots. That man is clearly crazy about you." "We're just getting to know each other," Natalie protested weakly. "We're building a friendship first." "Building a friendship," Vicente repeated slowly. "Right, because nothing says casual friendship like memorizing coffee orders and making special trips across town." Before Natalie could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Your business partner is very protective. I respect that. Also, did I mention you look beautiful today? Because you do. Have a good morning." She absolutely did not smile at her phone, except she totally did. "You're smiling at your phone," Vicente said accusingly. "Is that him?" "Maybe. What did he say?" "None of your business." "He told you that you look beautiful, didn't he?" Vicente's grin was triumphant. "Your face just went all soft. That's your he said something sweet face." "I don't have a—" "You absolutely have a face. You have several faces. I've catalogued them all." He stood up, straightening his shirt. "Look, I'm going to say this once because I care about you. That man is not looking at you like a friend, and you're not looking at him like a friend either. So maybe stop pretending this is casual and admit that you're both clearly already halfway to being completely gone for each other." After Vicente left, Natalie sat alone with her coffee, staring at Brandon's text message. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "You're pretty observant for someone who brought me decaf yesterday." His response came quickly. "I'm never going to live that down, am I? Never. I'm telling our grandchildren about this." She sent it without thinking, then stared in horror at what she'd written. Our grandchildren. Grandchildren. Why had her brain written that? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Our grandchildren are going to think I'm a terrible coffee orderer. Better not tell them about the time I also forgot your birthday wasn't until next month and showed up with a cake 3 weeks early." Wait, you remembered my birthday? Of course I remembered your birthday. You mentioned it once in passing 2 weeks ago. I put it in my calendar with 17 alerts. 17 alerts for her birthday. That was nearly 2 months away. Natalie stared at her phone, something warm and terrifying spreading through her chest. This was not friendship. Vicente was right. Marina was right. Probably everyone who looked at them was right. This was something else entirely, and the scariest part was how much she wanted it to be. Brandon stood outside Natalie's apartment door at 9 p.m. on a Friday night, holding a bag of popcorn, 2 bottles of soda, and a list of horror movies he'd researched for the past 3 hours. He was a CEO who'd negotiated million-dollar deals without flinching, but the thought of spending an evening on Natalie's couch made his palms sweat. "You're being ridiculous," he muttered to himself, then knocked before he could overthink it further. Natalie opened the door wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that fell off one shoulder. Her hair was piled on top of her head in a messy bun, and she wore the glasses she'd mentioned she only used at home. She looked comfortable, real, and absolutely devastating. "You actually came prepared," she said, eyeing his supplies with approval. "I'm impressed." "I take movie nights very seriously," Brandon said, stepping inside. Her apartment was exactly what he'd imagined. Warm, filled with books and plants, with framed architectural sketches on the walls. "Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at horror movies. I will definitely close my eyes during scary parts." "Noted," Natalie laughed, taking the bag from him. "I promise to warn you before the jump scares." They settled on her couch with the popcorn between them, a deliberate buffer that felt both necessary and disappointing. Natalie had queued up 3 movies, starting with a classic supernatural thriller. "If you hate this, we can switch to something else," she offered, remote in hand. "Natalie, I agreed to horror movies. I'm committed." Brandon grabbed a handful of popcorn. "How bad can it be?" 45 minutes later, he had his answer. "Very bad." "This is fine," Brandon said, his voice slightly higher than normal as ominous music filled the apartment. "I'm fine. Totally fine." "Your knuckles are white from gripping the armrest," Natalie observed, not even trying to hide her amusement. "That's just coincidental tension. Has nothing to do with the creepy ghost child currently appearing in mirrors." The music swelled. Something moved in the shadows on screen. Brandon's hand shot out and grabbed Natalie's arm reflexively. "Sorry," he said immediately, starting to pull back. "It's okay," Natalie interrupted, her voice softer. She shifted closer, eliminating the popcorn buffer between them. "You can hold on if you need to." Brandon's heart was racing, and it had nothing to do with the movie anymore. The next jump scare had him gripping her hand properly, their fingers intertwining naturally. Natalie squeezed back, and he couldn't tell if it was reassurance or if she was scared too. "You know," she said during a quieter moment, "for someone who's terrified, you're being very brave." "I'm absolutely not brave. I'm considering moving to a different country where horror movies don't exist." "Why did you agree to this if you hate scary movies?" The honest answer, "Because you love them and I'd watch anything if it meant spending time with you," felt too revealing. So Brandon said, "Because you smiled when you talked about them. That smile is worth a few nightmares." Natalie turned to look at him, her eyes soft in the TV's glow. "That's pathetic." "I know." "Sweet," she corrected. "Really sweet." They were very close now. Brandon could count the freckles on her nose, see the exact shade of brown in her eyes. The movie continued playing, but he couldn't focus on anything except the warmth of her hand in his and the way she was looking at him. Then another jump scare exploded on screen, and Natalie yelped, instinctively pressing closer to him. Without thinking, Brandon wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. "Okay, we're both terrible at this," she laughed, her face buried in his shoulder. "Absolutely terrible," he agreed. But he didn't let go, and she didn't move away. They stayed like that through the rest of the first movie, and halfway through the second. Natalie's head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her, their bodies fitting together like they'd been designed for it. They'd stopped pretending to watch closely, instead making commentary that had nothing to do with the plot. "That character is definitely going to die," Brandon predicted. "He just said, 'I'll be right back.' That's horror movie suicide." "Poor decision-making," Natalie agreed. "Unlike us. We're making excellent decisions right now. The best decisions." Very platonic, friendly decisions. Extremely platonic, she said, but her fingers were tracing absent patterns on his knee, and there was nothing platonic about the way his body responded to her touch. Somewhere during the third movie, the commentary stopped. Brandon felt Natalie's breathing even out, her body growing heavier against his. He looked down to find her asleep, face peaceful, one hand still holding his. He should wake her, suggest she go to her actual bed. The responsible thing would be to carefully extract himself and leave. Instead, Brandon carefully shifted them both into a more comfortable position, Natalie's head on his chest, his arms around her. He'd just rest his eyes for a minute, he told himself. Just for a minute. He woke to early morning light streaming through the windows and the realization that he'd fallen asleep on Natalie's couch, with Natalie still in his arms. She was awake too, he realized. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, and she hadn't moved away from him. "Morning," he said quietly, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," she echoed. "So, we fell asleep." "We did. Together. Technically together, yes." Neither of them moved. "This is probably weird," Natalie said. "Friends don't usually sleep together, on couches, platonically." "It's very weird," Brandon agreed. But his arms tightened around her slightly, and she pressed closer in response. "We should probably talk about this," she said. "We should. But maybe after coffee?" "Coffee sounds perfect." They disentangled slowly, reluctantly. Brandon stood, running a hand through his hair and trying to smooth his rumpled clothes. Natalie disappeared into the kitchen, and he heard the coffee maker start. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Rodrigo and 5 texts, the last one reading, "If you're dead, I'm going to be really annoyed." He texted back, "Not dead." "Fell asleep at Natalie's." The response was immediate. "Fell asleep at her place, and you're still calling this friendship? Man, you're delusional." Brandon pocketed his phone as Natalie returned with 2 mugs. "So," she said, handing him his coffee and sitting on the opposite end of the couch, notably farther away than they'd been all night. "So," he echoed. "That was nice. Last night. The movies. The sleeping. It was really nice," Brandon agreed. "Too nice. Dangerously nice. The kind of nice that made him want things he shouldn't want from someone who was supposed to be just a friend." "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" Natalie asked, not quite meeting his eyes. "I'd like that." They smiled at each other over their coffee, the air between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Brandon left an hour later, and if he replayed the feeling of waking up with her in his arms approximately 600 times that day, well, that was his business. Natalie stood in the middle of Brandon's penthouse kitchen, trying not to gawk. The space was enormous, all marble countertops and state-of-the-art appliances that looked like they'd never been used. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that probably cost more than her annual salary. "You don't cook, do you?" she asked, running her hand over the pristine stovetop. Brandon had the grace to look sheepish. "I can make toast, sometimes, when I don't burn it." "And you want me to teach you to make chocolate cake from scratch?" "You said it was your specialty. I figured if I'm going to learn to make one thing, it should be the best thing." That was both logical and oddly sweet. Natalie set down her bag of ingredients, rolling up her sleeves. "Okay, but I'm warning you now. Baking is chemistry. You have to follow instructions precisely." "I can follow instructions," Brandon protested. 20 minutes later, she was reconsidering that assessment. "Brandon, that's a tablespoon, not a teaspoon," she said, watching him add what appeared to be enough salt to preserve meat for winter. "They look the same. They're literally different sizes. That's the whole point." She grabbed the bowl before he could do more damage. "Okay, new rule. You measure nothing without supervision. I'm a CEO. I make million-dollar decisions daily. And yet you're defeated by basic measuring spoons. It's humbling, really." She hip-checked him away from the counter. "Watch and learn." Brandon watched, but probably not the way she intended. Natalie could feel his eyes on her as she measured flour, explained the importance of room-temperature eggs, and demonstrated proper mixing technique. She tried to focus on the cake, but his presence beside her was distracting, warm and solid, and close enough that their arms brushed every few seconds. "Your turn," she said, handing him the whisk. "Mix the wet ingredients." Gently, "I can do gently," Brandon said, then proceeded to mix with the enthusiasm of someone operating a jackhammer. "That's not— Stop! You're going to—" Natalie lunged forward to save the bowl, but Brandon turned at the same moment. The whisk flipped, sending a spray of chocolate batter across her cheek and into her hair. They both froze. "I'm so sorry," Brandon said, but his shoulders were shaking with suppressed laughter. I didn't mean—" "You got chocolate in my hair," Natalie said flatly. "It's a good look for you?" he offered. She stared at him. Then, with deliberate intent, dipped her finger in the bowl and swiped chocolate across his nose. Brandon's eyes widened. "Did you just— You started it." "I started it?" "You declared war." He dipped his own finger in the batter, advancing on her with a grin that made her stomach flip. "I'm defending my honor." "Your honor is debatable," Natalie said, backing up. "Brandon, don't you dare—" He dabbed chocolate on her other cheek, laughing when she gasped in outrage. "That's it," she declared, grabbing a handful of batter. What followed was the most dignified food fight two adults had ever participated in, which was to say, not dignified at all. They chased each other around the massive kitchen, laughing like children, getting chocolate on themselves, each other, and probably several $1,000s worth of Italian marble. Finally, Brandon caught her around the waist, pulling her back against his chest. They were both breathing hard, both laughing, both covered in chocolate batter. "Truce?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Truce," Natalie agreed, very aware of his arms around her, the solid wall of his chest against her back. He turned her slowly to face him, and the laughter faded. His eyes dropped to the chocolate on her cheek, and before she could process what he was doing, his thumb came up to wipe it away. But instead of using a towel like a normal person, he moved slowly, deliberately, his touch gentle. "You have chocolate," he said unnecessarily, his voice rough. "So do you," Natalie whispered. She reached up, her finger tracing along his nose where she'd left her mark. Then, without thinking about consequences or friendship or any of the very good reasons this was a terrible idea, she brought her chocolate-covered finger to her mouth and licked it clean. Brandon's eyes darkened. His hand was still on her face, thumb now tracing her jaw. They were standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the exact moment his gaze dropped to her lips. "Natalie," he said, and her name sounded like a prayer and a question all at once. "Yes?" She barely recognized her own voice. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She couldn't. Her eyes were already closing, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart racing as fast as hers. The distance between them narrowed to inches, then centimeters. Beep! The oven timer. They jumped apart like they'd been electrocuted. "The cake," Natalie said stupidly, her mind still trying to process what had almost happened. "Right. The cake." Brandon ran a hand through his hair, leaving chocolate streaks. We should get it out before it burns." "Yes." She practically lunged for the oven, using oven mitts as an excuse to not look at him. The cake was perfect. Golden, risen exactly right, smelling like heaven. She set it on the cooling rack with hands that definitely weren't shaking. When she finally turned around, Brandon was leaning against the counter, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "So," he said. "So. We almost just— We did." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. "Natalie, I think we should—" Brandon started. "Talk about this." "Yeah, probably. But maybe not right now." She gestured vaguely at her chocolate-covered clothes, her messy hair, the disaster zone of his kitchen. "I should probably clean up. And you should probably also clean up." "Right, cleaning, very mature and responsible." She gathered her things, very aware of him watching her every move. At the door, she turned back. "Brandon." "Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm glad we didn't— I mean, not that I didn't want to. I just think—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "Me too." But the way he looked at her suggested that "me too" covered a lot more than just being glad they'd stopped. It covered wanting, and frustration, and something deeper that made her chest ache. Natalie left, and if she touched her lips the entire cab ride home wondering what his kiss would have tasted like, well, that was between her and the judgmental taxi driver. Back in his penthouse, Brandon stood in his chocolate-covered kitchen, alone with his thoughts and the most intense case of blue balls he'd experienced since high school. They couldn't keep doing this, he thought. This dance, this pretending they were just friends when every interaction made him want her more. Something had to give. Soon. 2 months after the chocolate cake incident, Natalie couldn't remember what life had been like before Brandon Whitaker invaded every corner of her existence. He texted her good morning before she was properly conscious. He sent her memes during boring work meetings. He called her on his commute home just to hear about her day. They had lunch together at least 3 times a week, dinner twice, and spent most weekends either at her apartment or his penthouse, doing absolutely nothing and somehow making it feel like everything. She was in trouble. Deep, irreversible, terrifying trouble. "You're doing it again," Marina said, snapping her fingers in front of Natalie's face. They were supposed to be having their weekly Saturday morning coffee, but Natalie had been staring at her phone for the past 5 minutes, smiling at a text thread with Brandon about whether penguins had knees. They did, apparently. Brandon had sent 3 scientific articles to prove his point. "Sorry," Natalie said, putting her phone face down. "What were you saying?" "I was saying that I'm organizing a weekend at my family's cabin next month, and you're coming. And before you make excuses, I'm also inviting your not-boyfriend. He's not my—" "Natalie, babe, we've been over this." Marina leaned forward, her expression a mix of exasperation and affection. "You spend every free moment with him. You smile at your phone like it personally saved your life. Last week you cancelled our lunch to watch him give a presentation about software development, something you have zero interest in. It was an important presentation. You don't even work in tech. You sat in an auditorium for 2 hours listening to something completely outside your field just to watch him talk." Marina shook her head. "That's not friendship. That's something else entirely, and you know it." Natalie did know it. She'd known it since the almost kiss in his kitchen, maybe even before that. But admitting it out loud felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. "What if I ruin it?" she said quietly. "What if I tell him how I feel and he doesn't feel the same way? Or what if he does feel the same way, and then we try dating and it doesn't work, and I lose my best friend? Or," Marina countered gently, "what if it works out and you end up deliriously happy with someone who clearly adores you? He doesn't adore me. Last Tuesday, he drove 40 minutes in traffic to bring you soup because you mentioned having a cold. On Thursday, he sent flowers to your office with a card that said, 'Thinking of you.' Yesterday, he spent 3 hours helping you organize your architecture reference books by era and style, which sounds like actual torture. All true. All things that made Natalie's heart do complicated acrobatics. Fine," she conceded. "Maybe there's something there. But neither of us has said anything, and I'm not going to be the first to break our friendship by making it weird. Honey, it's already weird. You're just both pretending it isn't." Marina pulled out her phone. "Which is why this cabin trip is perfect. 3 days in the mountains, limited cell service, forced proximity. If you two don't figure your feelings out by the end of it, I'm staging an intervention." Before Natalie could protest, Marina was already texting. "Inviting him now." "What's his number?" Marina, "No." "Too late." "Sent." Marina grinned triumphantly. "I said we're doing a group weekend. Very casual. Bring hiking boots." Natalie's phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Marina just invited me to a cabin trip. Are you going?" She typed back. "She ambushed me. Yes, I'm going. You don't have to." "I'm in. Any excuse to spend a weekend with you." Natalie's stomach flipped. She showed Marina the text. "See?" Marina said smugly. "The man literally said, 'Any excuse to spend time with you.' Now how much clearer does he need to be?" Brandon sat in his office, staring at his phone like it might explode. A weekend in a cabin. With Natalie, and other people presumably, but mainly Natalie. This was either the best idea or the worst idea, possibly both simultaneously. "You're smiling at your phone again," said Rodrigo from the doorway. "It's disturbing. CEOs aren't supposed to look that happy." "I'm not happy, I'm just content." "You're texting her." It wasn't a question. Brandon didn't bother denying it. "Marina invited me to some cabin trip. Natalie's going." Rodrigo's eyebrows shot up. "A weekend away? With sleeping arrangements? Oh, this is going to be good." "It's not like that. There will be other people." "Right. Because you and Natalie are totally just friends who spend every waking moment together, know each other's coffee orders by heart, and look at each other like the other person invented oxygen. Rodrigo dropped into the chair across from Brandon's desk. When are you going to admit you're in love with her? The words hung in the air between them. Brandon opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it. Because what was the point? Rodrigo knew. Marina knew. Probably everyone they'd ever met knew. It's complicated, he finally said. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. You like her. She clearly likes you. Ask her out, properly. Take her on an actual date where you both acknowledge it's a date. Stop hiding behind this friendship thing. What if she says no? Then at least you'll know. But man, she's not going to say no. Have you seen the way she looks at you? Brandon had. Those soft glances when she thought he wasn't paying attention, the way her face lit up when he walked into a room, how she unconsciously leaned into him whenever they sat together. The cabin trip, Rodrigo said thoughtfully. That could be your moment. Romantic setting, time away from normal life. Perfect opportunity for a grand gesture. I don't do grand gestures. You faked being someone's boyfriend to rescue them from a bad date. You absolutely do grand gestures. Rodrigo stood, heading for the door. Just think about it. Life's too short to spend it pretending you don't want what you clearly want. After Rodrigo left, Brandon pulled up his text conversation with Natalie. Her last message was a photo of a client being ridiculous, with the caption, "Send help or coffee, preferably both." He'd responded with, "Coffee truck dispatched, ETA 15 minutes. And he had actually sent a coffee truck to her office building, because apparently he was the kind of person who did things like that now. His assistant, Donna Cecilia, knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a habit he'd long since given up fighting. "The flowers for Ms. Coleman," she said, holding a notepad. "Same as usual?" "Actually," Brandon said, "let's do something different. Wildflowers this time. More natural, less formal." Donna Cecilia's smile was knowing. "Wildflowers for your friend." "Of course. And should I include a card?" "Just thinking of you, like last time, and the time before that. And I get it, Cecilia." "Do you?" "Because everyone in this office has a betting pool on when you'll finally admit you're dating her. I have money on next month, so if you could speed things up, I'd appreciate it." "There's a betting pool?" "There's always a betting pool, Mr. Whitaker. We're bored." She headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, she's lovely. And she makes you happy in a way I haven't seen in the 10 years I've worked for you. Don't waste it by being stubborn." Alone again, Brandon looked at his calendar. The cabin trip was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to figure out how to tell his best friend that she'd become so much more than that. 3 weeks to find the courage to risk everything. 3 weeks to stop being a coward and admit the truth. He was completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love with Natalie Coleman. And based on the way his heart raced every time his phone buzzed with her name, there was no going back now. The cabin was beautiful, all rustic wood and stone, nestled in the mountains with a view that belonged on a postcard. Natalie stood on the wraparound porch, breathing in crisp autumn air, trying not to think about the fact that she'd be spending 3 days here with Brandon. "This is amazing," Brandon said, appearing beside her with their bags. "Marina's family has good taste. They really do." Natalie watched him from the corner of her eye. He'd dressed down for the trip. Jeans, a flannel shirt, hiking boots, and the casual look was doing dangerous things to her self-control. "Thanks for driving." "Anytime, though I maintain that your taste in road trip music is questionable." "ABBA is a classic." "ABBA is what happens when Swedish people have too much time and not enough supervision." Their bickering was interrupted by Marina bursting through the front door, followed by Rodrigo and his wife, Sophia. "Welcome to paradise," Marina announced dramatically. "Let me show you to your rooms. We have a slight situation." "What kind of situation?" Natalie asked warily. Inside, Marina led them down a hallway, counting doors. "So, there are 4 bedrooms. Sophia and Rodrigo have one, I have one. Vicente and his husband have one." "That's 3, Brandon said. "Yes, which leaves 1 for you two." Marina's smile was far too innocent. "But don't worry, it has 2 beds, completely separate." "Very platonic." Natalie's stomach dropped. "Marina, unless you want to sleep on the couch, it's very uncomfortable. I tried it once and my back hurt for a week, but totally your choice. Brandon's hand found Natalie's elbow. It's fine. We're adults. We can share a room. Are you sure? Natalie asked quietly. His eyes met hers, warm and steady. I'm sure, unless it makes you uncomfortable. No, I don't want to impose. Natalie. His thumb traced a small circle on her arm. It's fine. We've fallen asleep on your couch together. This is just that with actual beds. Marina watched this exchange with obvious delight. Great. That's settled. Dinner's at 7. Make yourselves comfortable. She disappeared before either could protest further. Their room was cozy. 2 twin beds separated by a nightstand, a window overlooking the forest, minimal decoration. It was also very small, which meant being constantly aware of each other's presence. I can take the couch, Brandon offered for the 3rd time as they unpacked. You're 6'2", you'll be miserable on a couch. I've slept in worse places. Brandon, it's fine, really. Natalie hung up a sweater, trying to appear casual. We're friends. Friends can share rooms. Right, friends. Something in his tone made her look up, but his expression was carefully neutral. Dinner was loud and chaotic, with everyone talking over each other, telling embarrassing stories and consuming alarming amounts of wine. Vicente kept making pointed comments about certain people who clearly have feelings for each other, while glancing meaningfully at Natalie and Brandon. Rodrigo wasn't much better, randomly asking Brandon about his intentions. My intentions regarding what? Brandon asked, confused. Life. Goals. The future. Normal dinner conversation topics, Rodrigo said innocently, while Sophia elbowed him in the ribs. By the time they returned to their room, Natalie was exhausted from pretending she wasn't hyper-aware of every glance Brandon sent her way. They took turns in the bathroom, changing into sleepwear. Natalie had brought her most modest pajamas, long pants, a loose t-shirt, but somehow still felt exposed when Brandon emerged in sweats and a fitted shirt that showed off muscles she'd been trying very hard not to notice. They settled into their separate beds, the room dark except for moonlight through the window. This is weird, right? Natalie said after several minutes of silence. Incredibly weird, Brandon agreed. Not bad weird, just weird. Agreed. More silence. Brandon? Yeah? Can I ask you something? She rolled onto her side to face his bed, though she could barely make out his silhouette in the darkness. Anything. Do you ever feel like... She paused, choosing words carefully. Like your life is moving forward, but you're not sure if you're heading in the right direction. She heard him shift, the mattress creaking. All the time. Is this about work? Work, life, everything. I have this amazing career, great friends, but sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for something. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. His voice was soft, contemplative. I spent so many years building the company, achieving goals, checking boxes, but none of it felt as real as... He stopped. As what? As the past few months have felt. With you. Natalie's breath caught. In the darkness, it was easier to be honest. I feel that too. Yeah? Yeah. Everything's different now. Better. Like I was living in black and white and someone turned on the color. She heard him move again, and then his hand appeared in the space between their beds, palm up on the nightstand. An invitation. Without thinking, Natalie reached out and took it. Their fingers intertwined, hands resting in the neutral space between them. Tell me something, Brandon said. Something no one else knows. I'm terrified of failing, she admitted. Not at work. I know I'm good at architecture. But at the personal stuff, relationships, love, I've never been good at letting people in. You let me in. I know. That's the terrifying part. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. Want to know my secret fear? Always. I'm afraid that everyone only sees the CEO, the money, the success, and that if all that disappeared, I'd discover I'm not actually interesting enough on my own, that I'm boring underneath all the achievements. Brandon, you're ridiculous. She squeezed his hand. You're one of the most interesting people I know. You make me laugh. You remember tiny details about my life. You fake rescued me from a bad date with the worst plan imaginable. You're terrible at horror movies, but watch them anyway because I like them. That's not boring. That's everything. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Natalie? Yeah? I really like spending time with you. It was such a simple statement, but the way he said it, quiet and raw, made it feel like so much more. I really like spending time with you too. They lay there in the darkness, hands clasped between the beds, talking about everything and nothing. Childhood dreams and adult disappointments, favorite memories and biggest regrets. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like they'd been doing this forever. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Natalie's words started slurring with exhaustion. "We should sleep," Brandon said gently. "Don't want to let go," she mumbled. "Then don't. We can fall asleep like this. What if our arms fall asleep? Worth it." She smiled in the darkness. "You're very stubborn." "You say stubborn, I say committed. Potato, potato." "No one actually says potato, Natalie. That's not a real thing. You're arguing linguistics at 2 a.m. while holding hands with your friend. This is peak you. This is peak us," he corrected softly. And it was. This strange, wonderful, terrifying thing they'd created, hovering between friendship and something infinitely more precious. Natalie fell asleep with her hand in Brandon's, both of them holding on like letting go might break whatever spell they'd found themselves under. Tomorrow they'd probably overthink it, question it, return to their careful dance of pretending this was normal friend behavior, but tonight, in the quiet darkness of a cabin room, they just held on. And that was enough. Saturday night found them all gathered around a massive bonfire, the flames casting dancing shadows across the clearing. Someone had brought a portable speaker, and old songs filled the mountain air, the kind that made you want to sway and sing along. Natalie sat on a log, wrapped in one of Brandon's hoodies because she'd forgotten to bring a jacket. It smelled like him, cedar and something indefinably masculine, and wearing it felt both intimate and dangerous. "You know what this needs?" Marina announced, clearly several drinks in. "Dancing." "No," several people said in unison. "Yes." Marina jumped up, pulling Rodrigo with her. "Come on, don't be boring." Soon, everyone was on their feet, moving to the music with varying degrees of coordination. Vicente and his husband were actually good dancers, making the rest of them look like amateurs. Sophia spun around Rodrigo, laughing when he nearly fell over. Brandon appeared in front of Natalie, hand extended. "Dance with me?" "I should warn you, I'm terrible at dancing." "Good. So am I." His smile was devastating in the firelight. "We can be terrible together." She took his hand, letting him pull her up and into the space near the fire. The current song was upbeat, something from the 80s that none of them knew the words to, but everyone sang anyway. They bounced around ridiculously, laughing at their own lack of rhythm. Then the song changed. Something slower, softer. An old ballad about love and longing. Everyone naturally paired off. Marina with Vicente's husband. Vicente was getting drinks. Rodrigo and Sophia, even the married couple from the neighboring cabin who'd wandered over. Brandon's hands found Natalie's waist, tentative. "Is this okay?" She nodded, unable to form words, and placed her hands on his shoulders. They began swaying, barely moving, just existing in each other's space. "Hi," he said softly, and she could feel his breath on her face. "Hi yourself. You're wearing my hoodie." "I am. Is that weird?" "It's perfect." His hands tightened slightly on her waist. "You look perfect in it." Around them, their friends danced, but Natalie could only see Brandon. The firelight made his eyes look darker, warmer. His face was so close she could count his eyelashes if she wanted to. "Brandon," she started, not sure what she was going to say, but needing to say something. "I know," he murmured. One hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I know." They weren't really dancing anymore, just standing together, swaying minimally, lost in each other. The rest of the world faded to nothing. No friends, no fire, no music. Just them. He leaned down slowly, his eyes searching hers for permission. She tilted her face up, her eyes starting to close, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could feel it. The space between them narrowed, centimeters, millimeters. "Okay, who wants s'mores?" Marina's voice exploded through the moment like a grenade. They jumped apart, both breathing hard. Marina stood there with a bag of marshmallows, her expression far too innocent to be genuine. Behind her, Vicente was clearly trying not to laugh. S'mores, Brandon said flatly. Right now. It's the perfect time for s'mores, Marina insisted. The fire's at the right temperature and everything. Marina, Natalie said through gritted teeth, your timing is impeccable. I know, right? I'm very thoughtful like that. Rodrigo appeared, took one look at Natalie and Brandon's frustrated faces, and started laughing. Oh man, did we interrupt something? We were just dancing, Brandon said, but his hand was still on Natalie's waist, and neither of them had moved away from each other. Right, dancing. Is that what the kids call it now? Rodrigo's grin was evil, because it looked like s'mores, Sophia interrupted, shooting her husband a look. Let's make s'mores and stop being obnoxious. The moment was thoroughly broken. Brandon and Natalie separated, returning to their respective seats, carefully not looking at each other while their friends passed around graham crackers and chocolate. But when Natalie reached for a marshmallow, Brandon's hand was already there, holding one out to her. Their fingers brushed, and electricity shot up her arm. Thanks, she said quietly. Anytime. They roasted marshmallows in silence, hyper-aware of each other. Natalie could feel the weight of his gaze on her profile. When she glanced at him, he was indeed watching her with an expression that made her stomach flip. Later, walking back to their shared room, the silence between them was heavy with everything unsaid. That was, Natalie started. Close, Brandon finished. That was really close. Yeah? They got ready for bed in their usual routine, but nothing felt usual anymore. The air between them crackled with tension. In the darkness, Natalie lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Brandon? Yeah? I'm glad Marina interrupted us. She heard him shift. You are? No, that's a complete lie. I'm actually furious with her. His laugh was quiet, but genuine. Me too. We should probably talk about this. We should. But maybe tomorrow? Tomorrow, he agreed. When I can think clearly and not just want to cross this room and... He stopped abruptly. And what? Her voice was barely a whisper. Kiss you until neither of us can think straight. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying. Tomorrow, Natalie said finally. We'll talk tomorrow. But as she fell asleep, all she could think about was how close they'd come to crossing that line, and how desperately she wished Marina had waited just 30 more seconds. They never had the talk. Sunday morning came too quickly, everyone packing up and heading back to the city. Natalie and Brandon rode home in comfortable silence, but the almost kiss hung between them like a question neither was brave enough to answer. On Monday morning, Natalie walked into her office to find Vicente practically vibrating with excitement. You need to sit down, he said, closing her door. That's never good news. It's amazing news. The Riverside Urban Renewal Project, the one we submitted designs for 6 months ago and heard nothing about. Natalie's heart started racing. What about it? They want you, specifically you, to lead the entire 3-month on-site development in Boston. It's the biggest opportunity we've had in years. Boston, 3 months, the chance of a lifetime. Also, 3 months away from Brandon. I know what you're thinking, Vicente said gently. But Natalie, this is huge. This is career-defining. You can't pass this up. He was right. She knew he was right. She called Brandon that evening, her stomach in knots. Boston, he repeated after she explained. For 3 months. I know it's terrible timing. Natalie, stop. His voice was firm. This is incredible. You have to go. But we were supposed to. We almost... I know. She could hear the smile in his voice. And we still haven't had that talk. But this is your dream. I'm not going to be the reason you don't chase it. You're not upset. I'm devastated, but I'm also so proud of you I could burst. He paused. When do you leave? Next week. The silence that followed was heavy. Then we have a week, Brandon said finally. Let's make it count. They spent every possible moment together that week. Lunch, dinner, late-night phone calls that turned into early morning goodbyes. They talked about everything except the one thing that mattered, what they were to each other. The night before she left, Brandon took her to dinner at their Italian restaurant, the one where they'd had their first real date, back when they were pretending it wasn't a date. I'm going to miss you, he said over dessert, his hand covering hers on the table. More than I probably should for someone who's supposedly just a friend. I'm going to miss you too, so much. We'll video chat every day. I'll send you terrible memes. It'll be like you never left. Except I won't be able to see you in person, or have coffee with you, or watch horror movies while you hide behind pillows, or watch you steal my hoodies," he added with a soft smile. "Speaking of which," he pulled out a shopping bag. "I got you something." Inside was one of his hoodies, the navy one she'd worn at the cabin. "Brandon, I noticed you seemed comfortable in it. Thought you might want it for Boston. It gets cold there." Natalie clutched the hoodie to her chest, fighting tears. "Thank you, Natalie." He stood, pulling her up with him. They stood in the restaurant, close enough to kiss, not quite brave enough to try. "When you come back, we're having that talk. No more avoiding it. No more pretending. Promise?" "I promise." Boston was rainy, cold, and 300 miles away from where Natalie wanted to be. The project was everything she'd hoped: challenging, creative, career-defining. But at night, alone in her hotel room, she felt the absence of Brandon like a physical ache. They talked every day, just like he'd promised. Video calls where they discussed their days, shared meals across screens, fell asleep with their phones still connected. "How's the project?" Brandon asked one evening 2 weeks in. "Good. Great, actually. We broke ground on the foundation today." She smiled at the screen. "How's the company?" "Tedious. Rodrigo keeps asking when you're coming back because apparently I'm moping and bringing down office morale." "You're not moping. I absolutely am. Your desk at my place still has your coffee cup on it. I refuse to move it." Natalie's chest tightened. "Brandon, I know I'm pathetic, but I miss you and I'm done pretending I don't. I miss you too. Every day. All the time." They stared at each other through their screens, the distance between them feeling insurmountable. 7 more weeks, Brandon said. 7 more weeks, she echoed. But that night, after they hung up, Natalie lay in bed wearing his hoodie and wondered if friendship was supposed to hurt this much. In his penthouse, Brandon stood at the window overlooking the city and came to a realization. He was done waiting, done pretending. When she came back, he was going to tell her everything. He just hoped 7 weeks wouldn't be too late. Brandon was in a meeting when Rodrigo texted, "Did you know Natalie's having dinner with some architect guy in Boston?" His heart stopped. "Excuse me," he said to the room full of executives. "I need to take this." He stepped outside, calling Rodrigo immediately. "What are you talking about?" "Sophia saw it on Instagram. Some mutual friend posted a photo of a group dinner. Natalie's there with her project team. There's a guy next to her. They look close." Brandon felt something ugly twist in his chest. Jealousy. Raw, burning jealousy. "It's probably nothing," Rodrigo said. "I just thought you should know." "I have to go," Brandon interrupted. "Where are you going?" "Boston." "Brandon, man, think about this." "I've been thinking about it for months. I'm done thinking." He hung up, already pulling up flight information on his phone. There was a flight leaving in 2 hours. He could make it. Natalie was exhausted. The dinner with her team had been productive but draining. Lots of technical talk, long discussions about structural concerns. Michael, the lead structural engineer, had been friendly, maybe a bit too friendly, but she'd politely deflected his obvious interest. All she'd wanted was to get back to her hotel and video chat with Brandon. It was 11 p.m. when someone knocked on her door. Room service, probably, though she hadn't ordered anything. She opened the door in her pajamas and froze. Brandon stood there, suit rumpled, hair disheveled, eyes wild with something she couldn't name. "Brandon? What? How?" "I got on a plane," he said, breathing hard like he'd run from the airport. "I heard you were having dinner with someone, and I couldn't." He ran a hand through his hair. "Can I come in?" She stepped back, letting him enter. He paced her small hotel room like a caged animal. "Brandon, what's going on? Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. I haven't been okay since you left." He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "I've been going crazy, Natalie. Absolutely crazy. Every day without you feels wrong, empty. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep wishing you were there. I see something funny, and my first instinct is to text you. Everything reminds me of you." "Brandon, I'm in love with you," he interrupted, the words tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back anymore. "I'm completely, stupidly, irrevocably in love with you. I have been for months. Maybe since that first night when I pretended to be your boyfriend. Maybe before that. I don't know when it happened, but I know I can't keep pretending it didn't. Natalie's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. You flew to Boston to tell me that. I flew to Boston because I heard you had dinner with another man, and I nearly lost my mind. Because the thought of someone else making you laugh, someone else learning your coffee order, someone else getting to be near you, it made me insane. He stepped closer. I know this is terrible timing. I know you're building your career, but I can't wait anymore. I can't spend another day pretending you're just my friend when you're so much more than that. How much more? Her voice was barely a whisper. Everything, you're everything. He reached out, cupping her face with both hands. You're the person I want to talk to about my day. The one I want to watch terrible movies with. The one whose hoodie I keep finding in my apartment and refuse to return because it smells like you. You're my best friend and the love of my life, and I'm terrified I've ruined this by saying it, but I had to tell you. Tears were streaming down Natalie's face. You're an idiot. His face fell. I know, I'm sorry. No. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. You're an idiot because I've been in love with you for months too. Since the restaurant rescue, since the first dinner, since you kissed my forehead and made my entire world shift on its axis. You what? I love you, Brandon. I'm so in love with you it terrifies me. Every day here has been torture because all I want is to be near you. And that dinner, that guy, I spent the whole time wishing he was you. Brandon's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Brandon Whitaker. I love your terrible jokes and your coffee deliveries and the way you watch horror movies even though you hate them. I love how you remember everything I tell you. I love... He kissed her. Finally, after months of almost, of nearly, of not quite, he kissed her. His lips crashed against hers with the force of everything they'd been holding back. She kissed him back just as desperately, her hands in his hair, his arms around her waist, lifting her off the ground. It was intense, consuming, everything she'd imagined and more. He tasted like coffee and possibility. His hands were everywhere, her face, her waist, her back, like he couldn't believe she was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. God, I love you so much. I love you too. She kissed him again, softer this time. You flew across 3 states to tell me that. I'd fly across the world. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. Every day if I had to. That's very dramatic. You make me dramatic. His smile was pure joy. What do we do now? Well, you just flew here at 11 p.m. You're probably exhausted. She took his hand, leading him toward the bed. Stay. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Just stay, nothing else? Brandon Whitaker, we just confessed our love. Let's not rush everything in one night. He laughed, pulling her close. Fair enough. But I'm holding you all night. I wouldn't have it any other way. They lay down together finally, after months of dancing around each other. Brandon wrapped himself around her, and Natalie felt complete for the first time since leaving New York. 7 more weeks, he murmured into her hair. We'll make it work. We will. He kissed the top of her head. Because you're worth waiting for. So are you. They fell asleep, tangled together, and for the first time in weeks, both of them slept peacefully. Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through hotel curtains, and Brandon's arms still wrapped around her. For a moment she thought she'd dreamed it all. His confession, the kiss, the overwhelming relief of finally admitting the truth. Then he stirred, pulling her closer, and she knew it was real. Morning, he murmured against her neck, his voice rough with sleep. Morning. She turned in his arms to face him. You're still here. Did you think I'd leave? He smiled, brushing hair from her face. I cleared my schedule for the next 3 days. I'm all yours. You cleared 3 days? Brandon, you never take time off. I never had a reason to. He kissed her softly. Now I do. Those 3 days felt like existing in a bubble separate from reality. Brandon worked remotely from her hotel room while she was at the construction site, and her evenings belonged entirely to them. The first night, they walked through Boston streets holding hands, actually holding hands, not the careful, friendly touches they'd perfected. They had dinner at a small Italian restaurant where Brandon fed her bites of his pasta and she stole sips of his wine. Every touch felt electric, charged with newness. I can't believe we wasted so much time, Natalie said as they walked back to the hotel. We didn't waste it. We were building something. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. We have a foundation now. Everything else is just construction. Did you just make an architecture metaphor? I've been practicing. Too much? It was perfect. She stopped walking, turning to face him on the empty sidewalk. You're perfect. I'm really not. To me, you are. He kissed her then, slow and deep, until she forgot they were standing on a public street and only remembered the taste of him, the feel of his hands on her waist, the way her entire body came alive under his touch. The second night, they ordered room service and watched a horror movie. Badly. They kept getting distracted, stealing kisses during scary parts, laughing when they completely lost the plot. We're terrible at this now, Natalie said, curled into his side on the bed. At watching movies, absolutely. Brandon's hand traced patterns on her arm. I have much better things to pay attention to. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her again. These kisses were different from the desperate ones in the hallway, slower, deeper, exploring. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head for better access. She pressed closer, her hands exploring the muscles of his back through his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brandon's eyes were dark with desire. Natalie, he said, his voice rough. I should probably go back to my room. You have a room. Next door. I booked it when I arrived. Didn't want to presume. Stay. The word came out before she could second-guess it. I want you to stay. Are you sure? She nodded, her heart racing. I'm sure. I want this. I want you. Something shifted in his expression, heat and tenderness combining into an intensity that made her breath catch. I want you too. God, I want you so much. He kissed her again, and this time there was purpose behind it. Intent. His hands moved with more confidence, sliding under the hem of her shirt, finding warm skin. She gasped against his mouth, her own hands fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. They moved together toward the bed, shedding clothes between kisses. When they finally lay together, skin against skin, Brandon paused, his eyes searching hers. We can stop, he said, even as his body trembled with restraint. Anytime you want, we can stop. I don't want to stop. She cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palms. I love you. I want all of you. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I'm going to take my time with you. Learn every inch. Make you feel how much I love you. And he did. His hands and mouth explored her with reverence, like she was precious, sacred. He whispered how beautiful she was, how long he'd wanted this, how perfect she felt. When she trembled beneath him, vulnerable and open, he held her like she was the most important thing in the world. Their first time was slow, emotional, overwhelming in its intensity. Brandon was gentle but passionate, attentive to every sound she made, every movement. When she clung to him, whispering his name like a prayer, he responded with words of love and devotion that made tears prick her eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts still racing, both overwhelmed by what had just happened between them. That was... Natalie couldn't find words. Perfect, Brandon finished, pulling her closer. You're perfect. I love you. I love you too. He kissed the top of her head. So much. They stayed awake for hours, talking and touching, unable to stop exploring this new intimacy between them. Brandon traced patterns on her bare shoulder, and she played with his fingers, amazed that she got to do this now, just touch him whenever she wanted. What happens when you leave? She asked quietly as dawn approached. We make it work. Video calls, weekend visits, whatever it takes. He tilted her chin up to look at him. I'm not losing you, Natalie. Not now that I finally have you. 5 more weeks. We can do 5 weeks. And then you come home and we start building our life together. Our life, she repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. So do I. The third morning, Brandon had to leave for a flight back to New York. They stood at her hotel room door, neither wanting to let go. This is harder than I thought it would be, Natalie admitted, her arms around his waist. I know, but it's not goodbye. It's just see you soon. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. I'll call you the second I land. You better. I love you, Natalie Coleman. I love you too, Brandon Whitaker. One more kiss, deep and lingering, and then he was gone. Natalie closed the door and leaned against it, a smile spreading across her face despite the ache in her chest. 5 more weeks of Boston, and then she could go home. To him. To them. To everything they were building together. The day Natalie's plane touched down at JFK, Brandon was waiting at arrivals with flowers and the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "Hi," she said, dropping her bags to throw herself into his arms. "Hi yourself." He lifted her off the ground, spinning her once before kissing her thoroughly. "Welcome home. I missed you so much." "Never leaving again," he murmured against her lips. "I'm implementing a no Boston policy." She laughed, pulling back to look at him. "That seems excessive." "I'm a very excessive person when it comes to you." He picked up her bags with one hand, keeping the other firmly clasped with hers. "Come on, I have surprises." The first surprise was that he'd stocked her apartment with groceries, fresh flowers in every room, and her favorite wine chilling in the fridge. The second surprise was that he had no intention of leaving. "Is this okay?" he asked, already settling onto her couch like he belonged there. "Me just being here?" "It's more than okay." She curled up beside him, finally blissfully close after 5 weeks of video screens and phone calls. "It's perfect." They fell into a routine quickly, naturally. Brandon spent most nights at her apartment, or she at his penthouse. They had breakfast together, commuted to work, holding hands, met for lunch whenever possible. He brought her coffee every morning, always perfectly made now. She left her architecture books scattered across his office. Their friends watched with undisguised delight. "Finally," Marina said at their first group dinner after Natalie's return. "Took you too long enough." "We were building a foundation," Brandon said, his arm around Natalie's shoulders. "You were being stubborn idiots," Rodrigo corrected. "But we forgive you because you're disgustingly cute now." "So disgustingly cute," Vicente agreed. "Last week I saw them share a fork at lunch, a fork. It was adorable and nauseating." Natalie felt her cheeks heat, but Brandon just laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Vicente." "I'm not jealous. I'm vindicated. I called this months ago." "We all called it," Sophia said. "There was literally a betting pool." "Which I won," Donna Cecilia announced proudly from the end of the table. "I had November for the confession. Pay up, everyone." The months that followed were a discovery of what it meant to love someone completely. They learned each other's rhythms. Brandon's need for morning quiet and coffee before conversation, Natalie's tendency to work late and forget to eat. They had their first fight over something stupid and made up within hours because being apart felt wrong. They celebrated small victories and comforted each other through rough days. Brandon met Natalie's parents over Thanksgiving, charming her professor mother by actually knowing architectural history and winning over her skeptical father by asking intelligent questions about his research. Natalie had dinner with Brandon's sister Paula at least twice a month, the two women becoming fast friends. "He's different with you," Paula said one evening while Brandon was getting drinks. "Lighter, happier. Thank you for that." "I'm not doing anything special," Natalie protested. "You're loving him, that's everything." 6 months after Natalie returned from Boston, they were lying on Brandon's couch watching a movie neither was paying attention to. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm, and she felt completely, utterly content. "Move in with me," Brandon said suddenly. Natalie sat up, looking at him. "What?" "Move in with me, officially. Bring all your books and your terrible throw pillows and your collection of coffee mugs." He sat up too, taking her hands. "I want to wake up with you every morning, fall asleep with you every night, build a home together." "Brandon, I know it's fast, but nothing about us has been slow, and I love you. I love you so much that having 2 apartments feels ridiculous when all I want is to share one with you." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll move in with you. I want that too, all of it." His smile was brilliant. "Yeah? Yeah." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. "I love you. I love you too." He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "This is just the beginning, you know." "The beginning of what?" "Everything." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Our life together. Our future. Everything I've been dreaming about since that first night when I pretended to be your boyfriend. Best fake boyfriend I ever had." I'm the only fake boyfriend you've ever had. Still the best." They laughed and kissed and held each other close, both knowing that this love they'd built from friendship and patience and perfect timing was something extraordinary, something worth every moment of waiting, something that would last forever. 6 months after Natalie moved in, Brandon suggested a weekend trip to Marina's family cabin, the same cabin where they'd shared a room, held hands in the darkness, and almost kissed by the fire. "Full circle," Natalie said as they drove up the mountain. "Something like that." Brandon's smile was mysterious, and he'd been nervous all morning, fidgeting, checking his pocket repeatedly. She thought it was cute. They arrived at sunset. Brandon suggested a walk to the lake, and Natalie followed, her hand in his, comfortable silence between them. The lake was beautiful, orange and pink sky reflected in still water, mountains rising in the distance. Brandon led her to the grassy shore, then turned to face her. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" he asked. "Of course." We danced, almost kissed. Marina interrupted with s'mores. "I was going to tell you I loved you that night. I had it all planned. Then I chickened out." He smiled, nervous. "I'm not chickening out anymore." He dropped to one knee. Natalie's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Natalie Coleman," Brandon said, his voice shaking slightly. "You're my best friend, the love of my life, the person who makes every day better just by existing. You laugh at my terrible jokes. You watch horror movies even though I'm scared. You've made me believe in love in a way I never thought possible." He pulled out a velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" "Yes." She was crying, laughing, nodding frantically. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood, sliding the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with everything he had. She kissed him back, tasting tears, hers or his, she couldn't tell. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too, forever." 4 months later, they married in a small ceremony at the same venue where they'd first met. The building inauguration had been held there. Their closest friends and family watched as they exchanged vows, both crying as they promised forever. "I never believed in love at first sight," Brandon said in his vows, "until I saw you across a room and knew my life had just changed. Thank you for being my best friend first. My love always." "I never believed in fairy tales," Natalie said through tears, "until a stranger pretended to be my boyfriend and turned out to be my soulmate. Thank you for the laughter, the love, and every perfect moment." When the officiant pronounced them married, Brandon kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Marina caught the bouquet and immediately threatened to throw it at Vicente's head if he made one more "I told you so" comment. I was 18 months later. Natalie stood in their kitchen, the one she'd designed when they'd built their dream home together, her 6-month pregnant belly pressed against the counter as she mixed chocolate cake batter. She heard the front door open, Brandon's keys hitting the entry table. "In here," she called. He appeared moments later, loosening his tie, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Making the chocolate cake, craving it." She laughed, one hand on her belly. "Apparently baby Whitaker has your sweet tooth." Brandon crossed the kitchen, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his large hands covering her belly protectively. "How are my 2 favorite people?" As if in answer, the baby kicked. Hard. "Active today," Natalie laughed. "I think someone's excited to meet Daddy." "I'm excited to meet them too." He kissed her neck, swaying them gently. "I love you. I love you too." They stayed like that, rocking slowly in their kitchen, the one Natalie had designed in the house they'd built together, with their baby growing between them. The journey from fake boyfriend to husband, from friends to soulmates, had been unexpected and perfect. "Thank you," Brandon whispered. "For what?" "For that terrible blind date. For asking me to rescue you. For loving me back." Natalie turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd transformed her entire world. "Thank you for being brave enough to pretend, and brave enough to love me for real." He kissed her, soft, sweet, full of promise. Their baby kicked again, as if celebrating with them. Outside their window, the sun set over the city they'd fallen in love in, painting everything gold. Inside, 2 people who'd started as strangers became friends, then lovers, then partners, held each other close and knew they'd found something precious. Forever. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.